Thank you, Manaz, for those very kind words. It is a genuine pleasure to be back again once more with WLP. You have marked 10 years and you've brought a wonderful array of people here for this particular important topic. And it's both a challenge and a pleasure to follow Thoraya, partly because I was in the UN as High Commissioner when she became Executive Director of UNFPA. And she did exactly what she said. She put culture there front and center. And I was very supportive because I had been using words like human rights must be embedded in the culture, etc. And now I think what I try more and more to do is to capture the approach that Thoraya set out so well by framing it in the context of Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Because I think the human rights community has not availed of the full potential of the first sentence of Article 1, that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And it's that dignity, it's that sense of identity, it's that sense of culture, and it doesn't mean that it's homogenous, as Thoraya said. There's great differences and distinctions, but it's within a broader culture, and human rights have to be embedded and come out of that culture. I remember very well being in Kabul on the first celebration of International Women's Day after the end of the Taliban regime. And women had gone into a cinema in Kabul and cleared the rubble because the cinema had been closed by the Taliban and partly destroyed. And they cleared about 15 feet of rubble. There was no roof, so the UN put in tent roofing. And we sat with the women, UNIFEM were there and some others. We sat with about 90 women, Afghan women, who were drawing up a kind of charter of their rights. They began each meeting with a prayer. It was very much from within their sense of how they wanted to advance again, how important education for girls would be, etc. And then we came in on the 8th of March. I remember it so well. And of course, as a High Commissioner for Human Rights and the head of UNIFEM and the two women who were in the cabinet of Chairman Karzai, as he was at the time, we were on the podium all right. And we looked down about 14 or 15 rows of men. And beyond those men were these women with their charter for women's rights. And but there were a lot of lessons in the way they approached the opportunity to write a charter of the rights that really mattered to them. I mentioned the 10th anniversary of WLP, and anniversaries are important. This year, we mark the 10th anniversary of an important Security Council resolution, Security Council Resolution 1325, that many of you will be very familiar with, and indeed I know that WLP do training on it. It's very much an issue for women on the ground in situations of conflict or post-conflict, and it is a resolution that was important in its time, but was weak in the enforcement and measures for monitoring and evaluating, and so it hasn't reached its full potential, despite the number of plans of action now for 1325. A number of us were in Liberia this time last year at the wonderful international symposium that Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf and President Tarja Halonen of Finland co-hosted. And to my astonishment, not only was 1325 a huge way of bringing about an excitement of the role of women, especially in all the security and other services in Liberia, but also they had managed to create a song about 1325. I can't sing anyway, but I wouldn't be able to render justice to it. But a number of us, and I'm sure many of you here in the room, were concerned that we mustn't mark this anniversary by rhetoric. We must try and be more effective, try and make it a real instrument of women participating at all levels, and that the UN appoint more women as special representatives to the Secretary General, to high posts. There's a new women's agency now, and so on. But also in the UN peacekeeping, in regional organizations, and at national level, that women are in the police, in the military, in all decision-making that particularly is significant in situations of conflict. And a few months ago, there was a kind of co-convening between Swanee Hunt and myself and our colleagues to bring together a number of people thinking about this. And Deputy Secretary General Asha Rose McGeera kindly came along and spoke. And we kind of encouraged her, or some might say maneuvered her, into agreeing that there should be a high-level steering committee within the United Nations to plan for the 10th anniversary. And I'm really pleased that that high-level steering committee has been created. Taraya is a member of it. And within the UN system, therefore, there's an opportunity to move forward and to gather in all the evidence from the ground that the UN is capable of gathering in, and the thinking that has been part of a kind of discussion internally within the UN system over a number of years. How do we now address the strengthening of 1325 and the strengthening of commitments of governments under 1325? And we thought it was also important that civil society would play a role in supporting, but also maybe encouraging and pushing the high-level steering committee of the United Nations. And I was privileged to be asked by Asha Rose to chair a small civil society group. And as soon as I was asked to chair, I immediately, needless to say, said it shouldn't be one chair, it should be a co-chair from the South. And I asked Binta Diop of FAM Africa Solidarity, and she was more than willing to co-chair with me, and we've been working together from the beginning. And we have, I think we're now up to 12 members of that civil society group, and it includes a number of strong men, because we want this to be a really effective group in the broader, inclusive sense that this is not just an issue for women, it's an issue for women and men. And Lakhdar Brahimi and let me think, I'm having an elder moment. Salim, former Secretary General of the African Union, and Don Stegman of the International Crisis Group have agreed to join with us. And we will be having our first meeting tomorrow afternoon, in fact. And one of the items on our agenda is that we feel that this civil society group should gather in more of the experience and the wisdom and the views and the priorities of women at grassroots. And I can't think of a better group than WLP within the 20 countries that you are working in to use just the next period to really try to gather in what is it that would be most effective for women on the ground, and how can we bring that then to the high-level steering committee and to governments, because we want to work very closely with governments. I think it's actually a new sort of collaboration of a kind where I've been invited by the Deputy Secretary General to be part of the high-level steering committee. So in a sense, there's a civil society presence. We have our civil society group, but it's small. It's not intending to in any way be other than a kind of platform or openness to the high-level steering committee of the UN and the governments who will be preparing for the 10th anniversary of 1325. So I've already decided, I had a breakfast recently with Binta, and we've already decided to sort of adopt the fact that there will be a mission later this month to Guinea and see what comes out of that, see what the women in Guinea want to say to us so that it can get through, so that we can ensure that that voice is heard in the high-level steering committee. Hopefully there may be a mission to Zimbabwe at the end of April, and I think, again, in the 20 countries that WLP is working in, I know that I can actually see the faces of some, like right here before me, like Asma, who are very active on the ground and have lots and lots of experience. Jacqueline, in your region. And I think it's really important that we use the opportunity to press for accountability and implementation, measures, indicators, measures that will ensure that for the next 10 years of 1325, we build on the work that's already been done. We build on the national and increasingly now regional plans of action. We explore the potential, the twinning that's beginning to take shape. But really, we also look for much more effective measures of real protection for women and girls and their families on the ground. Having been recently in places like Eastern Chad with a group of women, and more recently in Goma, in the camps there, and seeing and hearing the stories, and most of all, hearing that kind of tolerance because it's been going on for a long time, that awful undermining of dignity and worth, of the fact that we don't have zero tolerance of terrible sexual violence. And I think I'll end by saying one of the things that I'll bring to the table, and indeed I hope that the Irish government will also bring it to the table, is a practice that has grown up in my own country that I kind of mentor each year, and we're now into our 5th year. There is a coalition on gender-based violence in Ireland, which involves all of the agencies that work in development, humanitarian work in countries, and it also has impact in Ireland itself, the Irish government and the Irish Defence Forces. And they work as a coalition together, meet several times a year, and then in November we have a kind of feedback, and I come along to listen to the issues that the coalition has been raising. And the interesting thing is that each of the members of the coalition, and in particular the Irish Defence Forces at senior level, say, we never appreciated how important it was that we took the time to really address this seriously. And that, I think, is what we have to get every country to do, every country. And it's not just enough to have paper plans of action under 1325. It has to be a lived reality under 1325. So, as I say, it's a great pleasure to be back once more under the auspices of this wonderful organisation. I know that in the region that WLP covers, there has been progress, but also there are incredible worries for the brave women in Iran, our sisters in Iran, who need us to be with them and need us to be more vocal, I think, in defending them in their time of great difficulty. Women in Iraq who feel that the situation is not going forward and they're very insecure and they're wondering about the elections this weekend, and so on. I think one of the strengths of WLP has been to create a solidarity of sisterhood among us. And it's a great pleasure, as I say, to see such strong women in the audience today. Let's make use of this 10th anniversary of 1325 to really make it a strong, effective, broad way of women being empowered and being listened to and having voice and having their vision win out in situations particularly of conflict and violence. Thank you very much.